Hello, beautiful people, and welcome to the Occult Explorers. I'm Snappy, and I'm joined as always by my co-host and our special guest for this Gothic series, deMontford. How's it going, guys?
Oh, good. Good morning to you all.
Amazing, amazing. How are you doing, Dion?
Life is beautiful.
And you, Shay?
Oh, I'm awake. I'm here. It's happening.
Thank you for being here because, Shay, right, is joining us from Northern Australia, and it's the day after the solstice, a massive celebration, and you're here bright and early. What time is it there for you?
It's 6 a.m. So
Wow.
I've been up since 5 a.m. But
oh gosh,
it was a big day yesterday. Much alcohol was drunk.
Beautiful.
So I've been getting around going, can I get myself together in time? I did.
Yeah, you made it. Life is beautiful. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you being here. And happy solstice, everyone. And
yes.
We're here now for episode 5 of our Gothic Romance series, where we're diving deep and exploring the Gothic subculture and its roots in the occult and left-hand path of magic, right? So over the last several episodes, we've been diving deep, exploring art and literature, various figures. We started with our first episode with the Bat Cave and Bauhaus and Susie Shu, and we've been going down from history. So, Dion, where did we end off last time?
Oh, I don't even remember. Somewhere in the 1600s or...
Right.
Yeah, we had several digressions.
That's the fun of it, right? This is the thing too, is like, this is such a deep topic where you're like, I was talking with Dion, we have to do at least one more episode because we're nowhere near even making it to the Visigoths themselves yet, where the term even comes from. So,
I found myself on a movie set with a couple of people who were very Gothic, and I was discussing this stream with them, and they didn't even realize the history that was behind their own culture. And they were like, we're going to tune in and watch. So if they're there, hi.
Amazing. That's so fun, right? Well, this is the thing. Like, people, there's always been, as we've been saying, there's always been this Gothic left-handed magical kind of current, this subculture that is sort of subverted the trappings and the norms of our greater culture and has existed in the shadows, celebrating nature, celebrating death, and all of that which is taboo, turning it kitsch and having fun.
Rebelling, wonderful rebels.
Exactly. So what do you have in store for us today, Dion?
Well, first, I'd like to tell everyone to like, subscribe, share, leave comments. We enjoy all that. Today, the solstice, the death of the sun. It's perfect for the episodic series that we're doing. For me, it's part of the dark feminine, the femme fatale, through history and paintings, literature, and music. And it fits perfect for today. Sol Invictus has died. And yesterday in Australia, the shortest day of the sun.
Australia, longest day, yeah.
Our longest day.
Yeah. The inverse, right? It's such a wild time, I always think and connect things to the Roman tradition, which I'm most familiar with. And today, right, we're on the 4th day of the Saturnalia. Today was a very important secretive festival to the muse of Rome, Egeria, also known as Angerona. Today was called the Divalia or the Angeronia. And people used to gather in the temple to the goddess Voluptus, which is Hedon, the goddess of pleasure, and another name for the muse, Egeria. And they would, get drunk and celebrate. And, there are rumors that other stuff happens. There's rumors that other stuff happened, but this is an occulted tradition. So who knows what they got up to. But it's a wild, wild day, right? Yeah. And what's interesting is we were talking before you joined the stream here, Shay, and one of the threads that Dion is going to pull us into for this exploration of the Gothic culture is Diana Nemorensis. And for those who are deep into the Roman tradition, we recognize that Diana Nemorensis is the earlier iteration of Egeria. Egeria comes from the same grove and is kind of like the physical embodiment of that goddess. And, you know, Diana Nemorensis, we know, is such a radical figure who continues to be prevalent and influence modern witchcraft, right? We have, during the Wicked times, there was that character Rex Nemorensis, who was a famous occultist. But still, people worship this aspect of Diana to this day. Really, really important.
Yeah, and solstice is my birthday as well. So
oh wow, I didn't realize. Happy birthday. Yeah. No wonder you're such a magical soul.
yeah. 0 degrees Capricorn, and it was in an alignment where I've got like 5 planets in Capricorn. So yeah, work.
Yeah.
So it's very, very important to me. Very, very special festival. And as we often have on our greeting cards we send out for the holidays, I put on, have a cool Yule, which you're having, or a lovely Letha, which is what we're doing at the moment. So yeah, opposite ends of the spectrum, which is what our talk's about today. Yeah.
Amazing. Wild stuff. So how does all of this Diana Nemorensis Egeria stuff connect to the Goth culture?
Well, part of it's going to be through a series of paintings, and also the people's lifestyles. These artists' lifestyles themselves turn out to have Gothic underpinnings, we could say. And like I said, for me, it's the dark feminine is what I'm looking at. That, to me, that represents what Gothic is. Let's hit the first image and we can get started.
Let's take a look. Oh, 1 second. Here we go. All right, there we are.
And this is a painting right here. And also as well, we talked about Diana Nemorensis and Artemis.
Right. They're equivalent, right? So what's interesting with this figure of Diana Nemorensis that we got to recognize is that she's within, so this is a very ancient Roman cult that is kind of talked about in the Roman times in this vaguely mythic sense, right? At the time of Rome's founding, the Diana cult has already been kind of gone underground, right? Until you get King Numa, who kind of brings her into Rome as the muse, Egeria, and kind of brings in the triple goddess as the Carmente, which are the 3 muses of Rome. You have Carmentis, who is the mother founder of Rome, right? Also called Nicostrate, who's the one who flees from Troy with her son Evander in one of the myths. We have, of course, Egeria, who is the one who aids Numa and teaches Numa all the rites. And then we have also Porta and Vorta, which is about their twin muse. So sometimes they'll say there are 4, but it's really 3 because it's forwards and backwards looking in time, but also the placement of the baby in the womb. Because this is always, as we know, when you're dealing with the dark feminine, you're dealing with midwifery magic first and foremost. So that aspect is there. But like in the earliest traditions with Diana Nemorensis, you know, she is Hecate Trivia. This is the earliest reference we have, and this is a deep chthonic cult. And we were talking about briefly, but in the deep myths of Rome, the understanding was that the leader of the cult of Diana Nemorensis was a man who was a freed slave, but more than just a freed slave, he had to be an escaped slave, someone who fought for their own freedom. And then they had to slay the previous priest king. And that's how you became the leader of the cult of Diana Nemorensis.
The Rex Nemorensis.
Right, the Rex Nemorensis. And there's all this reference to, you know, Egeria is connected to the rivers that connect into Rome. So the Tiber River, there's all these hidden caves. There's all of this ancient Etruscan and Pelasgian magic that is all obscured. You know, if you go around this area of Italy, I did a talk with a dear friend of mine, Leslie, who's a spiritual medium and also connected to the muse of Egeria. And she spent time in this area, and they have thousands of these Etruscan cave-like things that people don't know what they were using them for explicitly, but we know that there was some kind of initiating mystery, right? So we're dealing with this ancient pre-Greek culture that came from Greece but predates modern Greek and settled in the marshes around what would become Latium. Really wild stuff, you know?
Mm-hmm. Well,
so what's this painting though, Dion? What do we have here?
Thanatos.
Thanatos, the good
Thanatos,
death.
1899 by Jacek. This is this painter. His last name is Malzuski, Jacek Malzuski, and this is 1899. His rendition of, I think that's the Greek goddess of death.
Yeah, well, Thanatos is non-violent death. It's like the spirit of good death. It's the good daimon of death.
Oh.
Yeah, and it meant like non-violence. And there's this idea that like within the Orphic tradition, there's all these hints that you would call on her and she would help you. So in the Orphic tradition, if you look at like the Orphic gold tablet, there's this whole mystery about you have to pass one river, the river Lethe, which is the river of forgetfulness, and you have to come to the next, which is the well of memory, you know, which is Memnosine, the mother of muses. And you're supposed to drink from the well of memory and recite this formula where you say, I am a child of the stars in heaven, but my nature is of the heavens. And this would allow you to pass on to the next realm, to leave the bonds of the earth and to become one of the divine. And there is this idea that Thanatos helps people to get to the right river, you know? But again, when you're dealing with the Orphic stuff, it's all obscured and there's so little references. So yeah. Yeah. Do you know anything about Thanatos? Have you heard this in your stuff, Shay?
Yes, not just in the Marvel universe. Yes.
But,
it was just the whole Nova Pompilus thing, and the early iterations of all the gods. We've got to understand this is the beginning of the cult of Rome. This is the basis upon which all the later philosophies that became the state religion of Rome were based. So they were taking. It's interesting that they took this darker side of the Greek mythology and started to, combine that with. Because there's elements, this, she's so Hecate. I just love her. She's so Hecate, and once they put all of these different elements together of the dark side, this became the basis for the cult of Rome. And then they built all the other myths and everything upon that and tried to include the Phrygian myths and the other myths that they were coming across, even the Celtic myths and the Celtic culture as they came across. Eventually wild. She became the Morrigan. The Morrigan was related to her. And, the Roman soldiers met her at the rivers, and they described meeting her at the rivers before the battles, washing, and she became the washer of the clothes over there. So if you saw her washing blood out of your clothes at the river, it wasn't a good sign. Because you were about to cross that river, and enter into it. Yeah.
That's so beautiful. It's wild you bring that up because I'm reading this amazing book lately. It's called, I can't remember the writer, but it's called Remus, and it's looking specifically at the figure of Remus and looking at the mythical founding of Rome, going through all the iterations of the myth. And the earliest version of the myth that they could find actually comes from the archaeology, and it's from the 4th century. So well after the founding of Rome, but still in this Etruscan milieu. And it was an Etruscan mirror that's engraved on the back. But the myth itself is explicitly the birth of the Lares. So what we see is you have this character of Nicostrate, Carmentis, fleeing with Evander, coming to Rome, but then it merges with the story we find in Ovid's Fausti with the goddess Tacita, who's also known as Lara or Lala, the babbling brook, right? The spirit of the waters. And her story, we've talked about this before, parallels Lucifer. She speaks up against Jove, Jupiter, to protect her sister who he wants to molest. And for this, she has her tongue ripped out and she's cast into the swamps of Latium. But this is also a wild magical image because it parallels what happens in Virgil to Saturn. So the Roman Saturn is not the same as the Greek Kronos. There's all this agricultural god and golden age mythos that's in the Roman version. And in the Roman version, there's this fall from grace where Kronos is cast out by a primordial Zeus, not his son Zeus, and sent to go to Later, where he brings about the golden age. So then the muse Carmentis, Nicostrate, right, is building Rome upon this earlier foundation. And in Virgil, right, Saturn returns as Saturnia. So there's this deep connection between, Rhea Saturn and Hecate that's going in this cult, and all of this weird agricultural stuff, and this myths of these falling from graces, challenging the gods and being cast out of the heavens. But the central element of the myth is that, Tacita, after she's cast out, she is sent to La Terre by Mercury, and they make love and they give birth to the Lares, the spirits of the crossroads. And it's them who found Rome, and not Romulus and Remus. So the earliest version of the she-wolf is actually the goddess Tacita or Hecate giving birth to the spirits of the dead, and the crossroads. It's wild stuff.
There's this thing with every new culture that arises from an old culture. It starts in the dark.
Right.
And it's becoming apparent, very much in our discussion, that the rebels are so important to the new that comes in, right? And this new culture, a lot of historians wouldn't realize how much the dark is, inherent in the birth of Rome. It really is.
Right.
Yeah.
No, it's so wild. And to me, it parallels to like that, the grand Hesiodic myth of the Saturnian cycle. Saturn slays Uranos and then is slayed by Zeus. And then Zeus is kind of slain by Athena. So there's this understanding that there's this cyclical changing and this coming into more justice, but also losing a primordial, it's like on one hand, Athena is seen as this grand justice, but she's also this horrible figure who destroys the Gorgons, and the Saturn is on one hand, this magical king of the golden age, but on the same time, he's the one who establishes the hierarchies. He builds the banks and he ends his own golden age by eating his children. So it's weird how Athena and Saturn also parallel each other as both good and bad rulers. It's wild stuff.
And there's a side to Diana as well. Diana, the horrendous punishments that happen if her followers got raped. Not their fault. And she goes from being this beneficent mother figure to this horrendous purveyor of justice, regardless of how innocent you are, this has happened, then this is the consequences. Yeah.
And also when you get into a lot of these deep connections, when I was going into what's his name? Ovid in his Metamorphosis connects Aegiri and Tacita to two other really interesting figures. Right. One is the goddess Pytho, who is the child of Cupid and Psyche and is the voice of persuasion, but also the goddess who's responsible for all of the abductions. And this spirit is equated with Medea directly as well. So there's that whole thing going on. And if you look at Medea, she seems to she's another one of these kind of Luciferian figures who tells off the gods and has to throw off the yoke, right, in order to come into her own power. It's really interesting stuff.
Yeah, always resulting in the birth of a new culture. These stories show that the rebel nature has to birth that new culture. It has to be there for any positive change to happen. It has to start in the dark, has to go underground. And there was the Dionysus. You're talking about Saturn and then Zeus and previous Kronos, but also Zeus did that to try and prevent Dionysus, who was supposed to be his successor, happening as well.
Yeah, he tricks the Titans into killing Zagreus with the spinning top. And this whole thing, what's wild, a while ago, I was talking about this with sorry, Dion, going off on a tangent. I was talking with my friend Leslie in our previous stream, and I was looking at the Aphroditic magic. Okay, so I wanted to know, what was the spell, according to the mystics, that cursed Medea? So I started diving into this, and it is the darkest, evilest thing I've ever found. And it parallels the story of Zagreus. It parallels the fall of Phanes. What they do is they take a nymph, specifically a special type of bird called the yunks, but this is also a goddess, They take her they bind her to a wheel of lapis lazuli and they spin her like a top, and they throw this into creation, and that's what distracts and binds you. This is the same story as Zagreus. Zagreus is distracted by what? A spinning top of lapis lazuli, right? And this is connected to Hecate as well. And that's how he falls and gets ripped apart. And that's how all creation is said to happen, right?
And the first in the Aradia, you know, the first fascination, they talk of the top that is spinning around that causes the son to fall in love with his sister, you know.
Exactly.
And I've never related that before. Penny drops. Yeah. The
you know, there's so many
that spins around. Yeah.
That which is above is the same as that which is below, right? So what happened to Medea is the same that happened to Faunis. But this is what I recognize is like, and Ovid tells you this explicitly in his Book of Love, but love magic is the greatest greed, most evil thing in this classical Roman tradition, because there's even an implication that it may create a whole other timeline, a whole, like it severs. It's such a violent attack that it changes reality. You know, it's really, really dark stuff. But this is what the goddess has access to. That's the power she has. It can bind or it can save, right? It's two sides of the same coin as well.
Absolutely. And it's an internal process. I mean, once somebody goes through PTSD, the world changes, you know. They go through that moment where they experience that dark and realize that the dark lives in the world and you have to look at it. Then all of a sudden your world gets a lot bigger, a lot deeper. You know,
and also lately, but diving so deep into the Roman tradition, it's been opening up a few really interesting avenues. So one of the things in Macrobius' Saturnalia, he says that Saturn and Dionysus are the same. They're the same energy. And he says this, but what's wild about what Macrobius says is he says that all of the gods who are generations of each other are like this. He uses this term called sympurgato. So he says Gaia is to Rhea, is to Hera. They're all distinct, but they're all the same at the same time. And so he says this about Saturn, Zeus, Dionysus, and Apollo, and Diana, that they're all the same energy, but distinct at the same time.
Yeah.
And things get so wild when you start to have in that implication, you know?
Yeah, individuating aspects of the divine, you know,
right?
But still it is the divine, you know?
The divine. But it's also like, it makes me think too of, Nietzsche has his whole political theory that he implies the Greek myths, where he says Dionysus is the spirit of liberation, Liber, who frees us. So you can see that Dionysus is that Saturnian force who starts the golden age, but then it becomes Apollonian, leading to a heights of culture, and then it turns Saturnian, right, when it stops expanding, it stops allowing for diversification, and it tries to control everything. So
it starts eating its own children. Yeah,
exactly.
That's right.
You see this cycle of that masculine energy where it goes from this free, loving force to this high culture to this force of control, and then it ceases to be relevant, and that new spirit of rebellion has to come in. And I think that's constantly what we're seeing in all of these cycles, and we're constantly having to react to this force. Like we're in the middle of a kind of a Saturnian moment right now where the old world is transitioning into a new phase of rebellion,
Oh, yeah. And it's definitely where governments are consuming their own children. Religions are consuming their own children. Yeah. But I mean, in our discussions, I just keep coming back to the Hellfire Cave, and having stood in that Hellfire Cave where you have the statue that is alive of Dionysus, and the statue of Diana that's on the other side. They took that age of enlightenment in that cave, literally worked with these energies to produce the golden age, and then now we're on that decline. We can see we're on the decline of that. But this started literally in a dark cave. And they
this gets into some of the Ammon stuff that Ammon is really into. Ammon is really into looking for empire building magic. And he believes that there's kind of this empire propaganda magic at the root of Rome and at the root of the English Empire. And you can see
look at the Hellfireclub. And it wasn't that hidden. They were doing it,
No.
and then they took it underground.
Well, Dion and I did a whole big talk on espionage, and we got into John Dee, and John Dee just does empire rights. I'm going to turn the queen into the goddess Diana. She's the Holy Virgin, and we're going to take over the world in the name of Christ. He just says it, and it's wild. But also, like, I'm getting into a lot of this English poetry, like, and there's this whole big theme where, like, there's this one poet who just lays it out, William Mason. He calls the Thames River Egeria. He says that the Thames is Egeria, and that we're going to summon that force to control. So he's literally taking these ancient forces and bringing them into his world. But I see this happening among all the elites of Britain at that time, and it leads to a British Golden Age.
It does. It does. And Queen Elizabeth was a Diana figure. She 100% was. She promoted that herself. A lot of people say that it was the Virgin Mary, but she promoted herself as the Virgin Goddess. And the propaganda and the poetry around kept comparing her to Diana. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, and this is, it's one of these things where they're all talking like, oh, we're Christian and, we're all prim and proper. But if you start to read the poetry, what these guys are doing in the bars and sharing amongst themselves, it's all explicit and out in the open. But no one's reading this anymore,
Oh, it's hidden. I mean, again, it's that cave thing. We can't let everybody know. Let's keep it underground, keep it hidden,
Right?
Yeah.
It was one of these things. And this is what Ammon always gets at, why he wants everyone to learn about the Greek myths and learn the Greek languages so that you can recognize this hidden layer, that these power brokers are playing with, that most people aren't even aware, right?
Yeah. I mean, why was Greek myth taught in Christian schools? But it is. It has to be. It's the foundation of our society.
Right.
Oh, well, we've lost
Dion.
Dion.
We were just about to get
back.
to you, Dion.
Come back, Dion. We love you.
Sorry. We need to figure out who this person is here. This beautiful, right?
Yeah. But I mean, it's so. I don't know if you've discussed the Aradia, which was a collection of Italian folk myths from the 1700s.
What's the name of that guy who wrote it? Charles. I'm trying to think of his name.
Godfrey Leland.
That's it. Yeah. Leland. He's a really interesting. So, talking to Ammon about this, he says it's 100% authentic based on the linguistics. But I come from like modern academia, religious studies. That's my background. Religious studies dismisses this completely outright. Says that Aradia is all made up. Now, my whole test for this kind of stuff is to play with the magic and see what works. And it worked for me. So
yeah, it does. It does.
Yeah.
The simplest little thing, like, I remember I was very first experimenting with it. And there's this in there about finding the holy stones upon the ground, literally finding a stone.
The round circle. Did you summon the goblin?
Yeah, the goblin. So I found it like a red stone. Somebody tipped it out of a fish tank. So I said the spell, put it in my pocket. And then I needed something. So I said the goblin spell. And then it happened. And I was looking the next day for this red stone, which is supposed to disappear. Could not find it anywhere. He'd taken the stone and gone. So
that literally happened to me. That happened to me. So I found a round stone. I did this thing. The spirit helped me a few times. But then all of a sudden, one day I missed where I didn't come and like dedicate some meditation time to the stone, and it rolled away. Never found it again. He took the home and ran. And it warns you in Aradia that it will do this. If you don't pay attention, the goblin will take off.
The goblin will take the stone. Or if you ask for a spell,
Yeah.
So we thought we'd lost you, Dion. We're so glad you're back.
Yeah. Leland is a really interesting figure, and the Aradia is something that everyone should check out. Again, another reason why I think it's so authentic is just look at that opening myth that you were mentioning. It's clearly an inspired piece. It's talking about the mother as that primordial one, and then giving birth to the twins, the two, and this rape that then leads into the descent of creation. That to me parallels all of the classical origin tales. It's the same as the Orphic.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
It's. But I mean, if you get an Aradia with a good intro, it very clearly states that this is a collection of myths, that it was done by folk magicians. That he came back and found a folk magician that was practicing just a few of these spells and making a great living. that this is exactly what it is. It's just a snapshot of the culture of the time, what remained of the culture of the time around magical stuff. It doesn't claim to be of huge antiquity. This is the folk magic of the time you lived there.
Exactly. But there is these kind of elements of antiquity when you dig into it, and there's all of this hidden stuff there. I think I think it's absolutely authentic. But I also believe that there's an authentic Italian witchcraft element in America. I think there's an authentic French witchcraft thing in Canada. Like, most scholars believe all this died out. No, I don't think it's that simple.
No, not
but
at all.
We should get on to you, Dion. Sorry for us ranting there. Tell us all about this beautiful painting here. Oh, you're muted, my friend. You're muted.
Actually, I was going to say, let's the next painting.
All right.
And this painting caused controversy when it came out in 1889. The artist's name is Zichet, and the title is Le Bal Noir, the Black Ball. And it's based off a real event that took place in Russia during the winter time, a winter ritual. They would have a winter ball every year. And this is the mother of the Tsar when we talked about Rasputin. Well, this is the mother that warned her son, don't get into Rasputin. She was one of the people that wanted to have him poisoned. And the reason that this image is controversial is that a couple days before the ball, the Crown Prince of Austria, Rudolph, had committed suicide with his teenage lover at the hunting lodge. And so they were supposed to have canceled the ball, but she went ahead with it. And that's the Russian Empress, Maria, how do you say her name? Fedorovna. Her real name was, what's her real name is, I got it right here. Dagmar. She was Princess Dagmar from Danish and German extraction. The House of Hesse at that. But when she came to Russia, she changed her name. Just like, was it Catherine the Great was Princess Sophia originally from Germany. Right. But so this black ball, and in this painting, they're having fun. And so they're in mourning while they're celebrating. And it's a winter ritual. And there's even some political intrigue in the painting that's, there's some stuff written in there, and it's talking about Rudolph of Austria. And it says he is just a uniform. That's what the author or the painter wrote in there.
Yeah, I see that. Yeah, he's just, that's clearly in French.
And so they're having fun and wearing black. And that was part of it, was to come to this celebratory ball, you had to be in mourning costume in black to dance and have fun at that. And they're having fun in the painting, wearing all black. And it's a snub to the Austrian royal crown.
What are they doing in the bottom panel here?
Yeah,
where they're holding up something.
Is that a crown of candles?
Something. There's lots of esoteric stuff in there when you zoom into it. That's why it's one of these paintings that it just looks simple on the outset, but there's so much symbology behind it.
So all of these people were gathering in protest and in rebellion to the Austrian crown.
No, they're originally going to go to a grand ball that they have every winter, and they get all dressed up in their finest. But because Rudolph died, committed suicide at that with the teenage girl at the hunting lodge, instead of canceling, she said, everyone show up in black and we're still going to party.
Okay.
And it's partly a snub to the royal family of Austria because they didn't cancel their ball when somebody had died on their side of the family. And so it's a snub to them. And after the author and the painters encapsulating that into the imagery. And part of it, I'm putting it to illustrate, we're going back to the little black dress, or the usage of wearing black, the mourning attire.
Right.
In a Gothic sense. And go to the next image. And this is 5 years. Well, that's her actually right there. Maria, and she's here's the image of her, and you can see her hand. She's throwing up her left hand, is doing the Sabazio sign.
Oh wow, she is.
It's very subtle.
Oh wow, she's got it. Yeah, that's wild.
You know, and she's the empress. And she had a troubling life. And she warned her son, do not get into Rasputin. And he didn't, and he banished her. Didn't believe her. And you know, you see what happened later. Everyone dies. But
except
but
for
yeah, hit
her.
the next
She
image.
survived. She's the only surviving Romanov. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, she tried to warn him, and she was a beautiful German Danish princess that and she would dance all night until finally the Tsar would have to come and kick out the musicians and stop them from dancing. And she would entrance people with their dances. But yeah, hit the next image.
She didn't fall prey to Rasputin, though.
No. She didn't believe it, not for 1 second. And so here's another painting that was controversial just 5 years earlier, 1884.
Oh, yes, I love this painting. I love this one.
Oh, she knows about it. Yeah, John Singer Sargent, and it's called Madame X is the name of the painting, Madame X. And it debuted at the Paris Salon in 1884, and it caused a scandal. She was a famous woman that got into trouble in Paris, and people protested because of the
bare shoulder,
the strap, the strap's coming off, and her skin is very pale, and it's that black dress again is causing a scandal.
Yeah.
And those curves, like this could be you could rock this in a modern situation and still be considered the height of fashion, you know?
Yeah.
Like this is a very beautiful dress. Very modern.
I've actually stood in front of this portrait in the British Portrait Museum. It's got so much power. It's lovely.
Wow.
Yeah. But this became a thing in culture, you know, if you like somebody.
Right, exactly.
Right, that little tease.
And the name is Madame X.
Oh, she had I can't remember her name, but she was
Virginia Avignon Gautreau. Virginia Gautreau.
Yeah.
And they wanted to kick her out of Paris.
Yeah, Madonna's Madame X was based partly on this character too.
Oh, amazing. Another witch, powerful, creative.
Yeah. And I would say that that's what we're seeing is witches. We're seeing the dark feminine through paintings and through the art. Go to the next image.
Oh, Salome.
1876. And this is Gustave Moreau.
Yeah, he's got some wild occulted paintings. I love his painting of Apollo. It's one of my all-time favorites.
And I guess he's called a symbolist. I don't know if that's, because there's Dada, Surrealism, it all goes over my head, but
yeah, the symbolists kind of come before, like, I'm trying to think. It's like precursor to what would become like, like Dali and stuff. What are those guys called? I'm trying to think. I'm just having a brain fart here.
Surrealism?
The surrealism, yeah. Symbolists predate. So like Baudelaire was a symbolist, and that was like a precursor art movement that became, surrealism. And surrealism kind of goes more into the dream, but they were deeply connected to the previous romantic era, but bringing in this magical element that then surrealism latches onto. So they're kind of moving further into the realms of the mystical and the dark, away from what the romantics were doing, but they're not yet into that wildness of surrealism and Dada. Like the form has not yet been broken. The rebellion hasn't been fully achieved yet. We're still he's still a classic. You can see it's still classical style, classical themes, but we're now going to the dark. We're now it's Salome, right?
Well, here really exploring, like I say, the headless theme, which is the Kepler, right? The saint with the head cut off, and here John is prophesizing as he's flying through the air on a charging plate, and that's part of the sub theme of the episode. Is the cutting off of the head, and you'll see that in some of the different art that they're doing through this time from Caravaggio and. We talked last week about Artemisia, and that'll fit into it. But hit the next painting because Gustav also did another image, which is Orpheus.
Oh wow!
With the lyre and the Grecian girl. Yeah, and it's that same imagery of the head prophesizing.
We got to tell this story though, because a lot of people don't know this story about Orpheus. And Orpheus is a very the Greeks, their figures are always these polarizing figures, you know, and the prophet Orpheus is no exception, right? In the story, he's one of the Argonauts. He learns the song of the birds from Medea, and he becomes the great mystic. But what ends up happening to him is after Medea takes off, him and Heracles hook up. And after he loses his wife, he goes through that tragedy. It says that he abandons feminine love and he decides to pursue pederasty, right? And he decides to substitute boys for the magic of the right. And for this, the Maenads rip him to shreds. They rip him apart and they take his head and they cast it into the ocean. But it flows down the ocean all the way to the island of Lesbos, where they then take it and they install it in a temple to Aphrodite, and it becomes this voice of prophecy. And it's said to have ridden upon the lyre.
Yep, a guitar. If people don't know what that is, it's a type of a harp. Let's say they attach the head to a musical instrument that can be played to prophesize, like the head of Brahm. It'll all come up.
There's all of this wild stuff with Orpheus, because if you start to unpack the Orpheus story with his wife, right, Eurydice, where the story is she dies while he's on his voyage, and then he cannot handle the fact that he lost her, so he tries to go back and bring her back, and then he fails because he doubts her. He doubts her ability to follow him. So the whole thing, to me, when I look at this from a mystical lens, Orpheus failed to lift the veil of Isis. He failed in the weight. He tried to dominate the muse. He tried to force her veil off. He tried to dictate who could live and die. He didn't respect that Eurydice's own life and death. Death and life are sacred things. And by trying to pull her out of the underworld, he condemned her to be a shade and didn't trust her, doubted her in that intense moment, and looked back and cursed her and destroyed himself. So this to me becomes this mystical moment where we see that masculine separate from the feminine because it tries to possess and dominate it. And when it fails to do so, it tries to dominate itself. You know, it tries to exploit the children, and it leads to this wild patriarchal violence and extremism that we see, where that whole path of Heracles goes, you know, just real ugliness.
Yeah, with, you know, but again, it's the poet, it's the art, it's the muse. You know, he was the most inspiring musician that's supposed to have ever lived. You know, and you know, this quality that made him divine made his, you know, his, even though he was ripped apart, his head couldn't die, so it could still prophesy. Still live.
He's still got the voice of the birds within him, right? The muses are still speaking through him.
Yeah,
he's a conduit.
This arrogance that comes, it's also about, I feel, this arrogance that comes when we realize our own personal divinity. You know, this, then we start to try and, you know, move outside of the universe that spawned us and its laws. And when you try and do that, you're going to get shown, yeah, you may be a bit divine, but you still are in this universe. You still have to.
It's so wild that you say this, talking about the becoming divine and the genius, because when I was looking into these myths of Egeria, there's a wild one where supposedly Heracles shows up on the shore, and winds up in the grove of Erysia, right? And he meets Egeria, and Evander brings him to see her. And what does she tell him? She tells him that he is going to become a god and that he needs to set up a shrine to his own genius if he wishes to complete his labors. And so that's what he does. And then he takes off and he finishes his, but you know, in the story of Heracles, right at the very end, he has to set himself ablaze to become a god, but he does, he becomes the next Zeus, basically. But there's this wild thing where the muse had to tell him he was divine, and then he had to worship himself, you know? I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah. And also, you know, highlights the fact, you know, is there a humble God? Is there a humble God? You know, when you become divine, you become too arrogant for your own good. Do you think you know better than the laws of nature? And, you know.
Well, it's also why, like, I think the other thing that we get with, you know, what happens especially by the Christian tradition, but what we have as this, you know, within the Greek tradition, you can see this, you know, this regulating of the feminine into the far corners and this dismissal of it, you know. In the earliest tradition, the feminine is supreme, and by the end, it's barely around anymore. It's hidden, or it's tied to male deities, or it's even been masculinized, like with the goddess Athena, you know. And what we see with this whole process, you know, is this kind of coming into this real intense, you know, one side of the path. It's all about the path of Attis now. We must ascend and become gods. We must rise to the heights of the air. But when you read the ancient text, it's a cyclical story. Saturnia has to come back. The goddess is meant to be abducted. When she gets abducted, she then becomes the queen of the underworld. That story doesn't end with her being abducted and abused. It ends with her overthrowing Hades and becoming the force of the earth. You know, but we don't tell that aspect. And we've denied that whole side, you know.
And the secret rites of the mafia, you know, Persephone is their main goddess. You know, she's the goddess of the underworld, you know, literally. So it's fascinating when you get into that. But the other aspect of what you were just saying was, like, even with Orpheus, you know, his mother warned him, let her go, let her be, you know, don't go. And then in the end, even though he rejects the feminine, you know, he's in this temple where he's dependent upon the women on Lesbos to look after his head for the rest of forever, you know.
That's true, right? He can't, even though he tries to abandon that, he can't, you know. But it's wild stuff. And this is such a beautiful painting. And again, right, it also makes me think of one of the things in the the Welsh tradition. Are you familiar? Dion and I did an episode on this with our friend Old Boy, but the Mabinogion in the story of Branwen. And Branwen has a very similar story with this kind of magic head and prophecy, where what ends up happening with her is her brother Bran is the giant, gets slayed in the battle in Ireland. But after the battle, she takes his head, puts it in her magic cauldron, and it turns into a prophetic voice. And then it was said that she buries it under this king mound, and that becomes the place where Brittany is born. And that leads to the entire English realm is the idea in this myth. No, you know, and a lot of scholars, you got to check it out. It's one that's been very, very, you know, made like, they get rid of most of the fantastical elements. The telling that we have is a more modern telling, and they try to turn Branwen into a person. But you'll recognize her as Venus. She is, you know, it's the Venus story. She gets abducted. A war happened. She's both Venus and Helen of Troy at the same time. It's really interesting. The Mabinogion.
Yeah, there's the Arwen myth. I'm very familiar with the Arwen myth because, you know, Arwen is, you know, in the Dionysus story, you know, like she's Ariadne, you know.
Yeah, of course.
And Arwen and Ariadne are very similar sort of names when you look at the derivation of them. But yeah, again, there's that huge crossover there. But yeah, the corona.
All these cultures are so connected, but there seems to be. The reason I bring this up is because Dion and I have talked about this many times, but there's this theme of establishing kinship and establishing prophecy through the women decapitating a man and taking possession of that head. Once the women take possession of the head, then a new king line can start, a new prophetic line can start. And this seems to go back to the real ancient stuff. Like when I was in university, we talk about the oldest cults that predate humanity. You know, the Neanderthals and the Denisovians are doing this. And it is worshiping of the skull and of the flame. That's the primordial. And to me, that's the goddess and this child. That is, you know, the root of this feminine tradition that we're looking at. You know, it's that great mother force. And then what she generates, the child, the ancestor, that dying and rising God is us. Dionysus is the everyman.
Yeah. And I used to have a picture of Mary Magdalene cradling the skull of Jesus on her lap. It just moved me to tears.
That's
but
amazing.
I always wondered what happened to the skull of John the Baptist, because it had its own cult. You know, we never speak about that now. What happened to that? Did that disappear? You know,
well,
are some of these depictions, you know, of the skull on the lap of the red woman, are some of those John the Baptist?
So a lot of these, because of the turmoil in the Middle East, there aren't too many of these people left. But there was, for hundreds and hundreds, maybe tens of thousands of years after John the Baptist's death, there was a Johannist cult, an endogamic Johannist cult of its own tribal group, where they said that John was the actual divine and Jesus usurped his cult. And they said that Jesus was a pirate and a fake. But they existed until Israel was established, and they were wiped out. But wild stuff.
I believe that that's sort of reflected in some of these myths of the skull on the red woman, you know, on the lap of the red woman. So
well,
which ends up getting.
Go ahead, sorry.
No, and ends up going all the way through to Skull and Crossbones, which is the modern secret society that the presidents are supposed to come out of in the United States.
Right. That's so wild. And, you know, to me, John the Baptist is very much a Dionysian figure. He's wandering around in the wilderness, eating nothing but plants. He's got big dreads,
locusts and honey. Locusts and wild honey.
Right. It's wild stuff. Like, and to me, it's like, you know, also talking with my friend Leslie here, and Ammon talks about this. It seems to me that Jesus is a title, right? When you go into the ancient Greek, that word connects to the name Jason, but Jason is a title. Jason means the shaman. It means the drug man, the one who learned the drug rites. So it seems to me like there were probably many Jesuses, and John the Baptist is one of these Jesuses, you know?
Yeah. How did he go from being Yeshua or Joshua to Jesus? You know, there's a bit of a gap there. You know, what is the difference between the two? Yeah.
You know, and there's so many of these different competing cults that happen in this area. So I'm thinking that what they did is they just took a bunch of them and mushed them together. And that really you had all of these people coming out of these Dionysian Gnostic current cults, these Orphic cults, the remnants of it. You take that, you force it into a Jewish framework, and you get Christianity. You know?
Add a bit of Buddhism, a little bit of Judaism, give it a good stir and a shake, throw it into the middle of a rebellion, push it underground, and see what comes up.
Exactly, right? So what do you want us to know from this painting, Dion?
Oh, that got his head cut off. Very simple. And there's a reason for it. Go to the next image. 1793. This is a wax casting of Marie Antoinette's head. Off with her head. And you know it was made by Madame Tussaud.
Tussaud, yeah.
Who came up with the Chamber of Horrors. And at the time, she was a gifted artist and would go and take engravings of different royalties' heads, decapitated heads. You know, and Marie Antoinette was famous for her hair and her head, and her hair was political at that. She used to put little miniature scenes in her hair of figures and it was political based at that. And she was there. She copied.
You know,
she copied Madame Pompadour. Madame Pompadour
was the big hair.
Yeah. And Madame Pompadour was involved in the Affair of the Poisons. You remember that?
Oh man, Lavoisier. How is she connected?
No, not Lavoisier. It's La Poisson. Oh, and that's Madame Pompadour. With the King Louis.
Right.
And so it deals with weaponized hair. And I just wanted to show you it's part of the theme of powerful people getting their heads cut off. Go to the next image.
I also want to just talk for a second, you know, because, you know, she's such a Helen of Troy figure, Mary, you know, because she was noble, but she had no power, no political sway, no nothing. And they made her the figure of hate. They made her the scapegoat for all of that anger against imperialism, and they brutalized. It's such a it's a scapegoat scenario. It's a sacrificing of the virgin. It's wild to me, you know?
Yeah, it was one of the first disinformation campaigns in politics, that in modern politics, because she used to live away from court. She lived on a farm. She, practiced, even though it was very, but she wanted her kids to be around farming and get their hands in the dirt and all that sort of thing. And when she said, let them eat cakes, it was not about being arrogant.
No, it's about the special type of bread that had fruit in it. And she wanted to subsidize the poor with a more substance and food source. That's what she was talking about. We should give them charity,
Yeah. And also the white bread was a real symbol of society, so the poor wanted the purified bread. And she's going, no, let them eat this sort of stuff. It's much better for you. And yet they took her words and twisted it against her, and then manufactured a thing about, abuse of wealth with a diamond crown, which, was something that they decided not to do. And it was a big scam that happened behind her back. And it was all twisted and weaponized against her, against the crown. Yeah.
To fuel that radical hate. And then we saw what happened, right? People love to celebrate this idea of revolution, and we did get our democracy from this French Revolution, but we also got to talk about what came. Countless decapitations. And it didn't stop until the madmen decapitated a bunch of nuns and the public went nuts and finally decided it was over. But it literally got to the point where they were murdering the innocent, people completely not involved in anything. It just got insane, beyond insane. The orchestrator, Robespierre, got his head cut off, wild madness. That's the spirit of rebellion right there, Dionysian wildness,
Well, and that's part of the theme of Off with the Head. So here, that's Madame Pompadour right there as Diana.
Oh, wow. That's so cool.
Yeah, she had it commissioned in 1746. And that's part of the theme is these powerful women have a Dianic side to them. The artist and the royalty. Go to the next image. 1724. Okay, so here's Catherine the Great wearing black in mourning. Her left hand, once again, doing that same symbol.
Yeah.
The Sabazios of the left hand wearing black.
99 and 666 when you combine the two, right?
Yeah. And remember, she had myth writers that said that she was the White Terror, Buddhist monks. She was
also okay. We got to talk about that White Terror thing, because this is a pan. So at this time, right, we are having the beginnings of modern religious studies and archaeology. The White Terror is this Buddhist goddess figure, but this plays into a theosophical concept, a mythological concept of the white European goddess, which then gets taken up by people like Robert Graves and becomes modern academia, even, where they try to connect all of these disparate figures into this pan-European spring goddess that they call the white goddess. Now, this theory has been largely dismissed in modern academia, but at this time, this is what's playing behind the scenes that's leading to this theosophical revolution, this whole modern pagan spiritualist revolution, is this goddess feminine current behind the scenes. And she's playing into this, east and west,
Voltaire going to Russia.
I'll be back. I'm going to bring something over.
Yep. Voltaire was going to Russia. And she's really originally Princess Sophia of Germany. Her lover was William Mons. Peter the Great had his head cut off and put in the bedroom, pickled and preserved in a jar so she could see it.
I remember you telling us that the previous episode.
Yeah. There was lots of picklings of heads going on. Peter had more than a lot of people, rebels, he'd have their heads cut off. Go to the next image.
What do you got before we get into this? What do you got for us here, Shan?
Oh, well, it's interesting that like I did with my religious studies, I also did Tibetan Buddhism. So this is Kura Kura, and you can have red Kura Kura or white Kura Kura. So Kura Kura, if you say the Kura Kura mantra 1,000 times, it gives you a power to get a wish granted. But if you say it 10,000 times, you can start to influence politics. All right. So this is very much politics mantra. And you see what she's wearing? Where is it? All the skulls.
Red and white goddess who influences politics. Does this sound like Pytho to you? Does it sound like that's the spirit of Egeria?
Yeah. So
that's wild.
So she's very important. And the modern Buddhists try to like get rid of her as well. Like she's just, but to the Bonpo and the indigenous Tibetans, she was very important. So, you know, all people that got married got 1,000 kurakulas so that they could get a wish for their new wedding, you know, the new marriage. So, but this headhunting thing where they wear the power of people and they accumulate that power through headhunting is prevalent in a lot of indigenous cultures spiritually. Yeah.
You see that in the Tibetan stuff explicitly and in some of the Tantrika where they're still doing these headhunting ritual. Now it's become ritualized and it's more about taking the bodies of the dead, of fellow monks and whatnot, but it is coming from that ancient magic, especially in the Bonpo. A lot of Westerners who go into the Tibetan Buddhism, they come out of it going, what the heck did I get myself into? They don't realize, it's not, it's because in our modern conception of Buddhism, we have this very philosophical, Western, whitewashed Buddhism, or you have Theravada or Zen, which again are more nationalistic, political forms of religion.
Theravada is actually very new. Yeah.
Right. Theravada, it's that modern academic version, right? It comes out of the monastery system of academia, and just as Catholicism comes out of that academic system of Christianity. And what do? They always seek to whitewash and oppress the more radical folk elements. They try to get rid of all of the stuff that they deem as, problematic. Right? Exactly. Yeah. Anything that is too pagan has to go. But yet it's still kind of pagan. You still have those pagan roots in Buddha. You can't strip it. It's too ancient of a cult.
Yeah. Uma Thurman's father, what's his name? I can't remember his first name, but he was the one that actually was responsible for introducing Theravada to the West. So it's not that old at all, No.
Yeah, it's wild stuff. It's also because like in the West, we put such an emphasis upon the written word and upon the academic tradition. And that Buddhist scholarship is really profound. And the Theravadins really kept the Pali Sutras, coherent. But if you get into the folk and the Zen stuff, the Pali Sutras don't even really matter anymore. It's like, so this is kind of, again, a Western kind of emphasis. Like we're all in this legalism, all in this literature. We want to find a Buddhist Bible, and apply that idea to another religion, and it doesn't really exist.
No, but this, like going back to Dion's concept of the head, I won't run off again, but I have a Tibetan skull bowl, which is like their cauldron. You put it on the altar, you put your stuff in it, and decorated with skulls, like little images of skulls around the outside, and it's plated in bronze. But the Buddhists harvest human body parts, like not just from their graveyards, because they're actually banned. You're not allowed to bring them into Australia anymore because a lot of studies have found that their thigh bone trumpets and the skulls are actually from teenage girls.
I know there's a lot of wild accusation. People don't know this, but like when I took my religion studies course, they show you this. Like Tibet lived as a religious monarchy for thousands of years, and they had total absolute control over their people. It's not all peaches and cream. And they did
not peas, love, and brown rice.
They did all of the most radical, magical stuff that you can imagine. Imagine if the Tantrikas had free reign. Yeah. And it's going to be good. It's going to be bad. It's certainly going to be wild.
Well, there's a lot of parallels between the theocracy of the Catholic Church and the theocracy of Buddhism. Lots of parallels. I mean, and they're the only ones in any of the Eastern religions that have a concept of hell to terrify people after death, similar to Catholicism. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
right? And you have these Pope-like figures, like, you know, and that's the thing, when you study the Dalai Lamas, you start to realize not all of these people are nice either. And so, you know, there's a couple of these Dalai Lamas who were playboy wild men who lived like kings, you know.
Oh no, yeah, it is. It's bad. Yeah. So
But
we've lost Dion again. No,
oh, sorry, Dion.
Dion.
we're rambling too much. But that's amazing stuff, though, connecting to this, the red and white goddess that you see in Buddhism, because you see that same dichotomy within the Western traditions, the red and white goddess. And it makes me think, you know, Robert Graves has a famous book called The White Goddess, where he looks for this figure. And then there's a modern occultist, I'm trying to think of his name offhand, but I really enjoyed his work. He has a book called The Red Goddess. And he does the same thing, but for Babylon. And Peter Gray, and he tries to find that red goddess figure in the tradition, and he connects it to, you know, he mostly deals with the modern stuff like Thelema and whatnot, but he does go all the way back to Hestia as that primordial fire, you know, as the heart of the city, is that, you know, really interesting that you get this kind of dichotomy with the feminine, you know.
Yeah, but this harvesting of body parts, like especially the skull, because the skull was believed to be the seat of the soul for many cultures for a long time. Not the heart, the head was. No. That's where the soul resided, you know, and the power, and this is in so many indigenous cultures. It's not so, you know, we're looking at something that's very primal, going back to the start of Greek and Roman culture, where, you know, the head was a sacred thing. If you kept the head, you kept the power. Yeah.
Well, one of the wildest things is when we go into the ancient Pelasgian, right? The pre-Greek civilizations, which, you know, one of the things that they did, which is so wild, is they set up all of these colonies all across the Mediterranean. They went as far as modern day Iran, and went as far as modern day Spain. Now there's accusation, you know, my friend Old Boy, he believes they made it all the way to the Tin Isles. They made it all the way to the British Isles. This is debatable in modern archaeology, but they certainly made it to Spain, which is incredible. And when we go to these sites, what they did is they would always have a central hearth at their city. And the hearth wasn't just where you went and you cooked your bread and you made your tools. It was also where you cremated your dead. And they would take the heads and they would install them around the hearth. So this would be the voice. This is where the priestesses would go and worship the ancestors and tend to that flame as the voice of the ancestor. You know, so this, it's so deep and it's so parallels. In the Orphic myths, you see a trace of this, but it's relating back to that real ancient stuff. Like I said, we have literal Neanderthals. When you go in some of these deep caves in Spain and Germany, they've got these setups where there's thousands of skulls all placed around these fire pits, right? And they're left offerings of food. They're left offerings of other things. And scholarship is now saying, we think that this is the beginning of religion, right?
Yeah.
It's really wild, but yeah. All right, Dion, you're back.
Yay.
Tell us about this painting here with is this another Salome? What's this one?
Yes, it's a painting of Salome, and this is 1649. But I wanted to take it back a little bit to getting more about Catherine the Great, because she was into some wild stuff like bloodletting. As well, Peter the Great had his mistress's head cut off, his Scottish mistress at that, and pickled and preserved. And he would bring that into the bedroom as well.
Oh yes, I remember this story. Yeah.
So he would have the head of his mistress, and he put in the head of his wife's mistress or lover as well. So you'd have two different heads. And this is all speculation, but she also practiced bloodletting. You know, she was into some wild stuff. But so this image right here,
that takes us back to another person we talked about, Ezerbeth Bathory, right? Bathory was bloodletting all those virgin girls. Apparently, could be all propaganda, but wild nonetheless.
Well, some people do bloodletting because they thought they'd go to the doctor and he'd say, "Well, we'll just cut you and drain all the bad stuff out." And you're really just killing the person.
Yeah, when you look at ancient Greek medicine, they had this concept of the four humors, and they believed that if you balance the four humors, then that would make you a healthy person. And it's phlegm, black bile, yellow bile, and spit. And if you had, or blood, sorry. Yeah, phlegm, black bile, yellow bile, and blood. And if you have any of these out of order, they would have to, you know, if you have too much phlegm, they got to bleed you or something. And this is what they would be doing, you know? And there is some evidence that this works, you know, leeches will get rid of a lot of diseases, but if you're sick and you're bleeding someone, it's certainly going to make their time a lot harder as well.
Now, a leech is different in that it has not an antiseptic, but it has chemicals that it works with, and just like a dog, when a dog licks the skin, it can heal. Remember, that's part of the Asclepian process. They would have dogs lick you because of the antiseptics in the skin. That oh, what's that?
Oh, leech therapy. Wow.
Yeah,
I'm writing a book on it at the moment. So we've got so many leeches where I live. And they're actually used to take my husband's blood pressure down. That was the easiest way we get his blood pressure down, was one leech would drop his blood pressure back down to normal. So he'd try and get a leech a day rather than having tablets. Yeah.
Amazing. Yep. I remember one time I got bit. I was fishing and digging for clams, and I got bit by a leech. I'd never seen a leech in Lake Superior ever. My parents had never seen a leech in Lake. I found the one leech, you know, but what ended up happening is I didn't realize it was a leech at first, and I pulled it right off, and then I just started bleeding. I wound up bleeding for 3 days. I had to go to the hospital and get them to put something on it, because like that stuff that causes them, you know, it impacts different people differently, and it really does work. It thins your blood and you'll bleed like crazy.
I would like to tell you a story connected to that goes back to the first set of images. That was Maria Feredanova. She protested some of the marriages of her sons and family because some of these royals suffer from what's the word, if I'm going to get it right, hemophilia. Hemophilia, where they have the inability to blood clot, and because they're inbred, and she didn't want the royals to keep mixing. She's like, yo, don't do it. And sure enough, they got married, had kids, and people have that problem.
Yeah, it's a sign of inbreeding, right? Right?
Wow. All right, so I'm going to take it back to this painting right here, 1649. Her name is Anela de Beltrano, but she went by the name of Diana de Rosa, Diana of the Roses. And she was a prodigy like Artemisia around the same time period, who studied with her father. Her father was also a painter and grew up in the studio. And once again, at 17, she's a female prodigy, but suffers tragedy as well. And she liked painting these mythical themes. Salome, Lucretia. So here's Salome, and in that kind of Caravaggio style. Go to the next image. Lucretia stabbing herself, and Artemisia, Caravaggio, and all of them did these same themes over and over. Like even Caravaggio has multiple beheadings.
Right.
And it's a theme that they're really into at that time. Go to the next image. And because we're dealing with paintings and popular people at that time. And so one thing I would like to tell you though, go back real quick. Diana de Rosa, Diana of the Roses, her husband stabbed her to death when she was 36 years old because he was jealous of her because she was beautiful and gifted and talented. And it's ironic that she did this painting of Lucretia. So go to the next image. And here we have the mother of Johannes Kepler, Katharina. Her name is Gouldman, Catherine Gouldman. And she was imprisoned as a witch because she was an herbalist. You know, Johannes Kepler, that's astrology. He had to use a lot of money and petition a lot of famous people to get her out of jail because she was an herbalist, but he was partly responsible for getting her locked up because he wrote a book called the Somanum. And it had a character, and there was like a herbal lady who communed with the moon, with the demon on the moon, Diana. And did herbal spells, and it was based on his mom, kind of, and got her locked up. But here's a famous painting of her. Notice her hairdo with the horns.
Yeah, that is wild. And it's wild that you bring up Kepler, because Kepler is such an he's like John Dee, and he's like Newton, half magician, half scientist. Most modern people only know him for his laws of celestial motion, right? But this guy was totally into the astrology. He was a court astrologer. Yeah. He was prophesizing for the crown, like as magical and as wild as you get. 90% of the stuff he was doing was occultism. Only 10% was science,
So, and a question, like I've always wondered about, and you can probably answer this for me, Dion, but I know I've seen this picture many, many times, and I've often wondered, was this painted before she was accused of witchcraft or after? Is the hairstyle indicating that she was a witch? Was it a propaganda picture, or was it this is what she did? And no wonder.
I think it's a propaganda pic. It's a propaganda pic. It's the demonizer, but it looks cool as hell to me. It looks very goth, and she eventually got out.
The other wild thing with Kepler is it's not just his daughter, but his mother who gets accused of witchcraft, right? They're after this man in his roots, It's wild stuff, because this guy did have, the thing is that he was useful. He was useful because he was providing people with a service. So he didn't get attacked, but his kids and his mother did.
Yeah. That's his mom right there. So go to the next image. I want to show you, and we're dealing with hairstyles again, weaponized hair. Marie Antoinette, weaponized hair. Kepler's mom, weaponized hair. Here's a Caravaggio of Medusa on the shield, the Saturn plate. And like I said, he also painted Diana Nemorensis. Go to the next image because you'll see more how it's connected. So I wanted to show you this image right here, 1587. This is Federico Zuccaro, and this is Mary, Queen of Scots.
Oh, wow.
Because remember, Mary got her head lopped off too, and in England there was a popular time when a lot of heads were getting cut off. Go to the next image.
Okay.
Yeah, it was really interesting that Queen Elizabeth I didn't want to cut off Mary, Queen of Scots' head because she was terrified of having her own head cut off. She thought that would happen to her if she let it happen to Mary because they were cousins. So
and there's all this weird thing that's going on, right? Because when we're dealing with the Medusa or we're dealing with the Gorgon, you're coming to the dragon priestesses, the Dracon, the root of that word. When we go to the root of the word Dracon, it comes from the Greek word drakomai, which means to see. And there's this whole thing about when you gaze into the eyes of the nymph, you turn to stone, right? You gaze into the Medusa's eyes, you turn to stone. But the Medusa is a priestess, right? They're the priestesses of Artemis. So there's this wild kind of dragon occult thing that's going on with all of these decapitations and with the hair stuff. And the feminine is that dragon force, right?
Yep. So right here, this is, last week we talked about Artemisia Gentileschi. She was a painter who was raped, talented. Her father was also a painter. She eventually went to court and they tortured her, even though she was the one that was raped. And eventually they got the confession out of the dude too that did rape her. And it was people conspired. It was a team that teamed up to rape her. It was a bishop, a painter, and a nanny when she was a young woman, because when you're 17, you got to be accompanied by an adult. So the people put in charge of her did bad to her. She eventually ends up in Florence with the Medicis being patronized. But here's her father already starting the themes with the Dianic painting of Diana Nemorensis, because that's a theme in Artemisia's paintings, was beheadings and these martyr women. And I showed you last time she had the painting with Judith beheading, but wearing a bracelet with Artemis when you zoom in. So go to the next image.
Right. That was wild.
Here is her of Salome. She did one of Salome too, a beheading. And go to the next image. Okay, I want to get into England because I talked about Mary, Queen of Scots. Here we got King Henry VIII, and he had a lot of people beheaded. His wife, Catherine Howard, Anne Boleyn. This is all around 1542, 1536. I mean, what the myth says is that he staked the river with the heads of her previous lovers as she was going down the river to execution. And they both went on a barge to the Tower of London to be executed, where Brahm's head is buried underneath the Tower of London.
Wow.
Yeah, Anne Boleyn's head. Yeah, she's Anne Boleyn's buried there. Yeah, is that what you're saying?
But I heard that Brahm's head was buried underneath the Tower of London as well.
Well, your brand.
Bromley.
So yeah. So
yes. Okay.
Yeah. So I'm not sure exactly where Bran's head is buried. It's like a myth.
That's the myth. That's the myth. Is that it's under the Tower of London.
So what it is about is it's the seat of London is the thing. And you know, the Romans, when they came to London, they say that London is this ancient place, and it was
Londinium.
They give it a special currency because they say that it's always been there. It's this magic city, and they connect it to the Welsh myth of Bran, and that he established his line under this hill there. I can't remember which one. I'd have to talk to Old Boy, but I don't believe it's the Tower of London. But somewhere in London, Bran's head is buried under a mound, apparently, and that's the seat of the city.
The Stone of Scone is in the Tower of London, which is an ancient Scottish, like it almost looks like the chopping block, where all the kings of Scotland had to, be seated upon it to be crowned. So they used to stick it under the throne as they were doing the coronations. And so King James I, or Sixth of Scotland, the first royal serial killer, he actually brought that stone to the Tower of London, and that's this symbol of the kings, and it stays there. Yeah.
Wow. And we forget how radical a shift that is, because it's changing entire dynasties. That War of the Roses is such a wild time. Like when Dion and I were doing our espionage thing and we were diving into Crowley, that stuff is still relevant. The whole reason why, we're dealing with speculation, but the speculation from several books that I read was that Aleister Crowley was sent to infiltrate the Golden Dawn because the Golden Dawn were against the Scottish crown. They were trying to reestablish a crown that went back to the Carolingians, and they were all about the blood, and they were literally trying to set up a Bourbon king in Spain. And Crowley goes to Spain as a revolutionary with a couple Golden Dawn members and sabages the whole thing and blows them up because they're they're monarchists, but not for the British crown.
I haven't heard that story before, but he definitely did work as an insurgent on several kinds for the British Foreign Ministry, which was the pre MI5 was the British Foreign Ministry.
Oh yeah,
and he definitely worked for them. He was the first 007 too. You know that. So
that's John Dee, right?
Oh yeah, sorry, it was John Dee. But his Crowley's allocation within the British Foreign Ministry, he was also 007. So
for sure, like he's definitely connected.
Yeah, and he was.
Go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, but he's definitely a spy. He's definitely an insurgent. He used to go in, and he was given several groups to do this too, including Hitler's Fuel Society, right, which he used to write for. Yeah. So this is why,
This is why, well, because he wrote a bunch of those, not a bunch, he wrote 3 or 4 racist pamphlets that then haunted him and still haunt his legacy because he was trying to infiltrate. Well, this is another thing, is that the argument is that he was set up to destroy the Golden Dawn because they were monarchists, Bourbonites, and I'll send you this book that makes all these accusations. It's a wild read. But the other thing they say is that he goes into the OTO because it's connected to German royalty, and it was also involved in all this espionage. So he infiltrates the OTO originally to subvert it. And as we know, he takes it over and makes it a Thelemic organization, but it was originally connected to the Reich. At least that's the accusation.
He bought a charter from the OTO on the condition that he wouldn't change it. And of course,
right. And then he
changed
changes it.
yeah. which virtually destroyed the OTO overseas. It just put him into a quandary about what they were going to do about it. So, and it dissolved. So yeah, he's very good at creating internal conflict. It's kind of sad that the British Foreign Ministry, which is now MI5, have never come out and officially, with freedom of information, released how much he actually did, for them in everywhere from China all the way through. And I think only because it would embarrass the Crown, with what he did, not who he was, but he did a lot of insurgent stuff.
In the book that I was reading, the author manages to get several documents from MI5, like proving that Crowley is connected, proving that there's correspondence, but we only have the base of paper trail. And he wonders if the evidence was actually destroyed, because the modern MI5 doesn't care. And they're willing to work with people, but they're not finding anything. So someone may have literally destroyed the files on Crowley, which is kind of depressing. But let's continue here, Dion. Sorry.
All right, hit the next image.
Cover.
You were speaking about Bourbonites and the Bourbon Crown. Here's 1547, around that same time period, and this is Catherine de Medici. And she wore all black after Henry died in a jousting accident. And she was into witchcraft, astrologers, and the occult and such. And this is a famous painting of her with Prince Louis of Bourbon's head that supposedly was brought to her. Jean Bodin claimed that she invented the Black Mass.
Yes.
And, the thing with Catherine de Medici, being into witchcraft and such, and she was known as the Black Queen or the Serpent Queen.
Serpent Queen, yeah.
Yeah. And she had a older cousin who was also with Henry. Go to the next image. Right. And here's Diane de Porter. And that was her older cousin who was the mistress of her husband. And he liked her better because Diane was 35 years old when he was 16 years old. And she would write his political documents for him, and she would sign it. Henry Diane. Co-sign it, and she was into the goddess Diana. Here's a famous painting of her by what's his name, Francois Clouet, and she's holding a mirror. And she, like I said, she also wore black and white after her first husband's death, even before she got with Henry. And she's holding that mirror as a symbolic reference to Diana Nemorensis. Because remember we did the episode about Lake Nemi, which means the mirror of Diana,
right?
And the Cumaean symbols. And so right here is and she was it. Watch, go to the next image, and this will seal the deal.
I also would just mention that one of the most common artifacts we find of the Etruscan variety are these mirrors to Aphrodite, and they usually contain mythopoetic scenes. When I was talking at the beginning, we talked about the earliest artistic version of the she-wolf, the wolf mother who gives birth to the twins, that iconic image of Rome. And the one we have is an Etruscan one from the 4th century that shows the myth of Tacita Egeria, not Romulus and Remus, so this is like, we're talking ancient stuff that at least goes back to like the 3rd or 2nd century BCE,
And she's also wearing black and white in reference to Diana as the moon. The white is the moon, and the black is the night sky. And like I said, go to the next image, and you'll see her royal symbol at court, and it's the triple crescents.
Wow, that's some Hecate stuff
before.
Right there.
Beautiful research, fantastic.
And
I've
so
always admired the dynamic between Catherine and Diane, because history likes to paint them as rivals.
Right.
I like to see them as a wing of power that got the king between them, and they were undefeatable, because Catherine was quite young when she came to court, and there's a lot of evidence to show that Diane actually protected her and stopped her being killed by her rivals. and that she did see her as an older sister figure, and that between them, because they're both very intelligent women, she made sure she was installed as the queen, and between them they actually ruled France amazingly well. But yeah, history wants to do this thing where they were just jealous women,
Right.
when
Well,
women
you know,
come together
part
and
of
work
Diana's,
well, it's amazing. Yeah.
Part of Diana's routine for beauty was hunting. She liked to hunt like an Artemis Dianic figure, and she would drink gold. That's what probably killed her at a young age, because they exhumed her body years later and they found that she had high amounts of gold. She would drink it and it would be in her hair and sparkling and gold dust, and it got the best of her.
Yeah.
But she was into alchemy.
Another one of the wild connections with her goes back to one of our favorite witches, Christine de Pizan. So Christine de Pizan, right? She's about 150 years before, in the 14th century, but she also comes from Venice. She also rules behind the scene with Queen Isabeau of France, who's another Italian queen. And these women are they're said to have created a secret society of women called the Society of the Rose, right? And they claimed to be ruling from behind the scenes. And they start that whole cult, at least they start the beginnings of the French Revolution with Jeanne d'Arc by writing the poetry. There's all this wild magical connection that leads up to Catherine the Great. You know.
Also look at the name of the painter I showed you. That her
Catherine de Medici. Sorry.
No, the one painter I was talking about earlier. Her nickname was Diana de Rosa.
Right.
Diana of the Roses.
Right.
It does make you think when you see that symbol, if there was a third woman that was there as well,
right.
If they're working in threes, like we are today, is a sacred thing, Yeah.
I would assume, is there another person we don't know about? I mean,
Yeah.
There probably
or
almost
one that
certainly
history's
is.
played down. Yeah. Might be worth us having a little dig around there.
Well, also you said the triple goddess, which is you said the Dianic ends up being a triple goddess in the end of the Hecate that you were talking about earlier.
Well, like when we were talking about, we're talking about Hecate, Diana. So Diana Nemorensis, right? In one of her earliest, when you do the archaeology and we're looking in the roots, one of the names they have for her at Erysia, at her grove, is Trivia. In the Greek tradition, this is only ever associated with Hecate, and then she has all these chthonic undertones. So there's this wildness that's going on between these figures in Diana Nemorensis, there's always this thing with the virgin midwife energy. Diana and Hecate and Eleutheria are so wildly interconnected. I've talked about this before, but like one of the crazier things is when you look at Delos and the establishment of if you look at the myths of the birth of Artemis and Apollo, in the earliest versions of the story, Artemis and Apollo aren't there. It's actually twin Hyperborean women, Opus and Arge, and they come from Hyperborea, the far north, taking the Danube River into Greece, and they come to the sacred island that floats around in order to worship the midwife, Eleutheria. They come to set up a temple there, but what we end up finding, even in the archaeology, is that the Greeks destroyed the statues of Opus and Arge. They bury them, they keep one shrine to them, and then they change their names and make them the abducted partners of the Dioscorides. They completely get written out of the story. And then the twins become Diana and Artemis and Apollo, right? And in the earliest version, Eleutheria is still there. She gives birth to the twins. But eventually, Eleutheria herself gets displaced, and Diana gives birth to herself and gives birth to her brother, So we see this, and eventually even Diana becomes displaced, and it's just all about Apollo,
Yeah, and she ends up in the official later state myth, she becomes the midwife to her brother. Yeah.
Right, exactly. And that the goddess Eleutheria, who was this in the earliest version, where these twins are traveling to go meet her, all of that disappears. And Eleutheria, like Ammon told me he believes that this is deeply connected to Hecate, that midwifery. You know, Hecate seems to be this. This is explicit in the mystery rites around the Corey, because what is the role of Hecate? She's the torchbearer, and she helps her transition. She helps her go to the underworld and raises her back from the dead. What does a midwife do? She births us. You know, so you're seeing that duality of the image. Hecate is the one who takes you to the underworld. Elithwea is the one who brings you into life.
Yeah. And we're going back to Turkey there, where we have the vulture goddess, who was the midwife, and also the person who she brought you into the world and she took you out, you know.
Yeah.
So she did the funeral rites as well as the birthing rites. So,
and we know that the vulture is so sacred in the Greek, right? Plutarch, I believe it's Plutarch, can't remember now, but one of these guys tells us that the Greeks saw the vulture as the cleanest of all animals, because they didn't kill their own, they didn't eat birds, and they only ate carrion. You know, and Medea is connected to the vulture, and the vulture comes to eat Prometheus's liver. But that gets all weird because both the vulture and the liver are plants when you go into the deep entomology. So I have no idea what's going on there fully. It's clearly some kind of magic rite, but
well, this the sky burial. I mean, even today, sky burials around the world, the vulture or the carrion bird takes the body up into the heaven the quickest. So it's the quickest way of, you know, going up to your next level.
Because you don't pollute the elements, right? This is that idea, you know. But, you know, like I remember when I was doing my master's in India, we went to a Tower of Silence in Mumbai, but now they cremate the dead because there are no vultures around to come eat the carrion.
They're trying to bring the vultures back to a couple of those Towers of Silence, but I'm sure I think there's some that function properly in Iran, but most of them in India don't anymore, you know, which is they've
sad.
taken away their habitat. So,
right.
So
and even in Tibet, they've stopped doing the sky burial. They used to do those burials where they would just let the bodies just decay on the side of the mountain, and they don't even do that anymore.
Well, the chod grounds, but the vultures were very important to the chod grounds as well. Yeah.
Absolutely. But that's your presentation, Dion. Anything else you want to end us with?
Oh, no, that's it right there.
That's amazing.
And get ready for the next one where we'll get into more beheadings and more Gothic characters.
I'm going to do research on that symbol. I've just taken a screenshot of it. And I'm going
to I think I found it. I think it's their cousin, Maria Savati. Is that third triple goddess that's part of their family that was a powerful person in the clique.
Clever man. There you
That's
go.
always thinking. I'm like, well, who's that? Because that's what that would mean. That's three powerful women, or three aspects of a goddess.
So Maria Savati, did you say?
Yeah, I was thinking that. Yeah, that's her cousin. That's one of their cousins.
How do you spell Savati?
Salavati. I think that's how you say it. I'll have to do more research.
Yeah, okay.
But she was a prominent woman at that time in their family.
Yeah, because Savat is also an indigenous French martial arts. So
Savat, yeah. And this is like salve, like a savior or healing, like Salvati, I think.
Salavati.
Yeah, if I'm correct.
Before we ended
here, do some more research, and that's one of the relatives.
Yeah. Cool.
So before we ended here, I wanted to show you guys, because several people had mentioned this, you know, when they think Gothic, they think the architecture. And one of the things we have yet to really show or talk about is the architecture, because we haven't gotten there in the timeline really, because most of this Gothic architecture is happening in the 4th, 13th, 12th centuries. But I thought it could be fun at the end of the presentation here just to do a quick, we're going to show you some of the best examples. And it's important to understand with this Gothic architecture, when you're in Europe, right, these are the most affluent, most grandiose buildings, and they're looming large in these cities, right? So there's this oppressive grandiosity of the past that's constantly bearing on people that leads, you know, and so there's this high art appreciation that always comes. And I think this really had such a profound impact on the Gothic culture. Dion and I were mentioning, you know, Bauhaus, one of the first goth bands, arguably the first, they are architectural students. They take their name from an architectural school, so that this idea of really looking to this oppressive, intense architecture of the past is really important to this story as well.
And there was a Gothic revival in late 1800s, in England for the turn of the century, or in the 1900s. They got back into the style. Like, oh, this is fun.
One of the wild things about the Gothic architecture is, right, well, it has its heyday in, the 14th century, but it also continues right up until the 19th century, until modern times, you could argue, because like Gaudi's cathedral in Spain, the Sagrada Familia, which we'll look at, is still being built. It was supposed to be finished this year, but COVID delayed it until 2034. So
I love that cathedral.
It's just
yeah.
And we also, many of these places are super magical and are super culturally important. Like, we have to talk about Notre Dame. And Notre Dame is deeply connected to the occult world as well. So many witches connect this as a temple of Isis. And there's a lot of rumors that, this is literally a temple to Isis.
Well, it's placed on top of sites. They're all placed on previous ancient worship sites, as well as ley lines. And at that, even in the architecture, they do get acoustic and magnetic properties based on your different layouts and designs, your arches, or you'll see a lot of the two arches, the walking boas concept, or you'll see the spiral. And some of the architecture, like it has incorporated in it the golden mean,
right,
and different stuff that connects to it's called archaeoastronomy, where you're connecting the shape or the layout of your church to events in the sky. Like, we think of it as pyramids and temples, but even modern churches are laid out to the solstice and to the equinoxes.
We also got to remember, right, while the church is financing these architectural wonders, they are not building them. It is the masons. It is the working people who are building them. It is the working people who have the magic, who have the architecture and all of this power. And this literally leads to all of these secret societies, because you empowered this middle class who builds. Because what ends up happening, when you start establishing these cathedrals, and you can't just build them, you need the most advanced scientists. So then you have to empower all these people with this magical knowledge. And that leads to an enlightenment. And it also leads to the establishment of incredible wealth, because anywhere you built these would become a pilgrimage site, and you would set up a market. And so all of these people became hugely, what it did was, in the early Middle Ages, you have a noble class and you have serfs. By the end of the 14th century, you have this business class. The middle class emerges that eventually overthrows the nobility. And it's through this kind of establishment of these secret societies, the Masons and Martinists and similar, but the empowerment that was created through these building projects, the church spending these vast amounts of money and bringing people together and creating a middle class, totally revolutionized. It wound up sabotaging their own effort to maintain control.
Yeah, very, very interesting that you say that, and that's been burnt and now rebuilt. But another thing I've always noticed about the architecture of this from the front is that when you have a look at esoteric architecture, it's actually the magic square of Saturn, the 3x3, which is also a lunar square, where the 1 is, where the 617, where the phi ratio would be across the top. The 1 is open to the sky, like a magical tuning fork, like a channeling of that divine energy in. And these people knew this mathematics. I mean, the Abramelin ritual is based upon this as well. You have the magic square, you're going to channel in spirit, and what's all around the top of Notre Dame, the little gargoyles. Oh yeah, they're just for channeling water down. Sure they are.
Sure they are. They're not protective Larry spirits, give me a break. It's wild stuff, right?
Yeah.
Just so incredible. So that, of course, one of the most famous examples. We now have the cathedral at Cologne, another deeply magical place. Goethe is associated with this place, and we know Goethe is one of the great revivalists of that classical tradition, one of the most magical people of his time, and we see this, anyone who's going to, the other thing with these things is when you would go in, you'd have the organ, and the organ at the time was the most advanced piece of machinery the world had ever seen. The organ literally means the mind of God, so you would enter in this temple and you'd see these people playing the temple as a giant instrument, expanding on those water organs of the ancient Greek world. It's the same ideas taken to their absolute height of Apollonian extravagance, just really beautiful and wild. Right. And so that's Cologne. Sorry.
And Asherah high place, the high places were where you worshipped Asherah, not where you worship Jehovah. You worship Asherah at the high place.
That's true. Right. Yeah. You gotta build her little pillar. She's the tree. Yeah, that's wild. So, Notre Dame was in the 12th century. This is the 13th century. The next one I wanted to show you, of course, is another really important one, Westminster Abbey, right? Which is deeply, deeply occulted. And we have all of these rituals where all of these marriages and crownings happen here, right? This is the heart of British Empire. This is where all of the magical rites take place. And again, we're seeing, like you pointed out, we have a Saturn square with the open spot where the one would be. Now that you said that, I can't not see it,
Yeah. But again, it was built around the tomb of Edward the Confessor, and he is considered to be the founding king of England, even though in 1066, when he was buried there, was when the Normans came to England. But all of the planning of burials of the kings afterwards all took place because it was considered to be the place, if you were a true king of England, you would be connected again with the earth. So it's got this sort of like where the other ones are pointing upwards, this one's bringing the energy down. This is the tombs, this is where they're buried, this is where we're anchoring the royalty into the ground of England and the royal marriage with the land and all that one. So we've got ones that go up and ones that go down. This one's coming down. Yeah.
Super interesting.
Yeah.
Definitely see that. This is another really famous St. Vitus's Cathedral in Prague. I just loved the architecture on this one. It just blew my mind when I saw it. I wasn't aware of any massive occult history with it. This is a really interesting one. This is the Seville Cathedral. It was originally a mosque that then was converted into a cathedral. But unlike a lot of most of the time when they converted mosques, they would destroy them, but they kept the mosque architecture and incorporated it into the cathedral. So you get this really kind of wild amalgamation of ideas. And what's so incredible about this is that, the Islamic world, because it's non-icon, their high idea of art was always in the architecture, and they really pushed this style. And there is this clear, there's this clear magical process that happens where we get this revitalization of the ancient world through the Islamic world. The Islamic world was translating the Greek texts when the Christians were burning them all. And so, like, for example, the Picatrix brings back a lot of Western magic to the Western world, but that's an Arabic document. We had lost a lot of that astrological magic, and then it gets retranslated and reincorporated. So there's also this magical conversation happening in the cathedrals that I want to point out between the Muslims and the Christians. They're becoming united. Science and math are winning in this moment,
Yeah. Sorry, I did architecture before I swapped to psychology, and esoteric architecture. My teachers used to get so fed up with me being esoteric about my architecture. All right, but Islamic architecture focuses on the moon. There's usually an opening to the moon, and the moon is very sacred in Islam. That's a portal to the sun. I've not looked at this closely before, but that's definitely a portal to the sun on the ceiling there, on the rooftop.
Wow.
Not a portal to the moon. You can see the sun symbolism around that.
Right.
So they're converting the energy of the moon to the energy of the sun. By doing this. Yeah.
That's so interesting. No, that's such a good point, right? Because the Islamic, the Muslims, they keep that horned goddess symbol and they turn it into their symbol, and they have they utilize that lunar calendar in such wild way. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, no,
That's the symbol that Diana has, the little
Yeah.
the horns on the head.
Well,
yeah,
go ahead. Sorry.
In Islamic culture, the feminine is sacred. You know, there is some, you know, it's a bastardization of the extremists to say that, you know, they hate women. They don't. But this is definitely turning the feminine into the masculine here. So that's what we've got.
Right. Yeah. Unlike in the Christian tradition, you have in the earliest iterations of the Quran an explicit androgyny to that divine being. It's always beyond gender. Whereas in the Christian tradition, it's always gendered because God incarnates as a man. We don't have that issue in the Islamic world, you know.
No,
it's
and the
quite
green.
interesting.
Yeah, the women were to be respected. It was the basis of Islam being created in the 600 was to protect women. Right? They were divine. The green color being sacred is for the feminine. You know, if you've ever seen what's inside the Kaaba, you know, the Kaaba inside.
Yeah,
Mecca.
they just it's just an empty room, and they got like a couple. Yeah.
Oh no, there's black rock. It's like a.
Well, no, they got a black rock is on the outside. In the inside, they got a table where they used to put all of the shrines, all of the icons, the idols.
Yeah.
But on the outside, they got that black meteorite, similar to what you see in Rome.
But it's a vagina. You look at it, it's a vagina. You know,
it's
and all
vagina,
these guys
and you go and you kiss it,
and they rub it to
you know? You go and rub the vagina. Well, where the stone is where where the clitoris would be. You go and you're rubbing the goddess. You know, it's wild to me.
It's so there in their architecture. You know, it's so out there. But you know, when you say this used to be a mosque, and it's so definitely not now because it's golden. It's got a portal to the sun. Yeah, right. And it's spiky.
And it's spiky. That's very Gothic, the spiky stuff, right?
Yeah.
But it's you can see that amalgamation, though, you know, where there is still some of that Muslim influence.
Yeah, the porticos. Yeah.
Right. And I just wanted to show this kind of cross-cultural thing that happens in the cathedral building because they're all about the math, and this is where these two and the magic. This is where Islam and Christianity fall apart and the magicians meet is in that exploration of the mystical and the science, right? This is a really wild one. This is the Seville Cathedral in Spain, and this is from 1402. And I just wanted to show this because of the heights of extravagance here. You know, by the 14th century, that Gothic form has taken on its most just intense levels of like look at this. You know, it's just absolute. It's a giant painting. You never see things like this nowadays. You know,
it's gorgeous. Yeah, and those arched ceilings, they've almost lost the art of doing these arched ceilings now. You know, and it's only 200 years ago. How can we lose an architectural technique in 200 years, 300 years? You know, but they have. Yeah.
So this is actually, sorry, it's not this is the Orvieto Cathedral in Italy. Sorry. Okay. And this is the Milan Cathedral, which is really, really famous. And this one is from 1386 is when it was first started to be built. And this is one of the largest cathedrals in the world, you know, just like incredible architecture, you know? Next, I wanted to show you, this is the town hall in Florence. It's called the Palazzo Vecchio. And this is from 1299, where we get some of that earlier castle imagery. But when you go inside, you get that high, grandiose, you know, imagery, which to me is just quintessentially Gothic, you know, like all of those ceilings, all of those paintings, you know, just wild.
Yeah, but the boxiness of a functional building, you know, which is not divine, you know, you can certainly see the difference in what they
it's no longer a church, right? This is now for politics.
Yeah.
Right. And then we have, I wanted to show you palazzos from Venice. So these are 3 different palazzos. On the left, you have the Palazzo Contrarini di Bolvolo. At the top, we have the Palazzo Ducale, and then on the bottom, at the top, it's the Car d'Oro. This is the most famous of all the palazzos and the best one that's kept. And then on the bottom, it's the Palazzo Ducale. But these were palaces that were built in the 14th century by the doges. These two were built by the Doge Contrini d'Oro, who his family ruled Venice 8 times as doges. And they were one of the 12 founding families. But in Venice, as we saw, they had their ties into France. They had their ties into England. They were traveling the whole world. They're right at the cusp of bringing in this middle class because they are the merchants. They are the establishment of that merchant class. They are the ones who are funding the building of all of this art. And they're the ones who wind up displacing the previous nobility and lead to the next revolutions. It's kind of wild stuff.
Beautiful.
So that's what I wanted to show you. Oh, we got one more here. This is a castle in Italy called De Firenze, and this is more of a classical style. This is one of the oldest Gothic ones I wanted to show. This is from 1096. So this is going as back as far as, this is where Gothic architecture sort of begins, the beginning of this. And then last I wanted to show where it's going. So this is the Sagrada Familia. Yeah. It started being built in 1896, and it's still being built. When I went on the website, it's supposed to be finished by 2036. So wild stuff, right? Gaudi in Spain. So we're still building these architectural wonders in the Gothic style to this day. The idea
but it's so organic, this one. It almost looks organic. So.
Yeah. Well, you're starting to bring in, as much as it's still incorporating what we consider Gothic with all these spires, all the spikes, all of the stonework, it's taking on this very natural element. Like one of the things that you'll see, you're into architecture. The golden ratio is everywhere in this building, and it's purposely done so. There's all of this magic through the numbers and the placement of everything. When it's done, there's going to be 13 spires with Jesus as the middle spire going right under the sun. They lined it up so when the sun hits noon, it's going to shine directly on the spire of Jesus. It's going to be so incredible when this thing is done.
Yeah. And somehow it still looks like an anthill.
Right. It does kind of have that oh wow, right? Yeah. Like it's just been built out of the mud.
Yeah. Well,
really, that's what it is.
Anthill, is it? Yeah.
Yeah. So Dion unfortunately had dropped off on us. He lost his internet, but I just wanted to give you guys a quick overview of some of the architecture so you could see that impressive imagery and that beauty and power of the past. Remember, when we're talking about the Goth subculture, it's coming out of the 70s and 80s England when they're in this incredible decline. Empire is over. Yeah. The British don't know what to do. They're in the greatest unemployment spur they had seen in 100 years. You have this massive boom of youth, right? Children, young people who are running around with no opportunities. And what are they under? They're under the wealth of the past. They see the decaying empire and they want to engage that imagery and bring it into the now, right?
Yeah. And it's certainly the psychology of the architecture. When you're in the pulpit, right, and you look down at the congregation, it makes you feel big and in control.
Right.
But if you're in the congregation looking up at the pulpit, it makes you feel small. All right. So like this, walking into any of these cathedrals, all of a sudden you're overwhelmed with this amazing achievement of humanity that looks to be divine,
Right. And it's also, it's like, it's so different, like I grew up Catholic and I remember the first time I went to a cathedral, I didn't understand. It blew my, because I was used to going to a more modern, Vatican II mass where everything is in English. The priest faces you. Then I went to this cathedral in Montreal. The priest's back is to me. Everyone is looking at the divine. Everything is in Latin. I don't matter at all. You know, it's something that's totally different. You know, most modern people don't understand this. So when you go into these places, it's like literally going to an ancient past in some ways, you know?
I was very lucky while I was in England. I was able to, because there's two family castles like within the family. One is Carcassonne in France. The deMontfords are infamous with that one. And then Simon deMontford in England is Castle Kenilworth, right? And he brought in the Magna Carta and all that sort of stuff from Castle Kenilworth. But both of them were attacked by the establishments and taken down. But they were also, if you have a look at these, functional buildings, but, you know, definitely the Gothic architecture is still there. So Carcassonne they've both been passed back to their respective governments as historic buildings because they're way too much to maintain by anybody.
Right, no one can own that. Your taxes would be infinite.
So, but so much history happens in these places. I mean, and you know, to go back, and when I walked through the door of Castle Kenilworth, and you have to sign the book, and she goes, "Name, please," and I went, "Shay," and what's your surname? And I went, "deMontford." And she was like, deMontford, as in deMontford from this castle, deMontford. I was like, well, not exactly. I'm sort of Australian, but
right. Maybe if you go back far enough.
Back in the way back. So right? But the power is still there in these places, and it's really like, and I was so lucky to find. You know, we caught up with Old Boy while we were in England as well. When you go to these places, if you get a chance to get out of your chair and go to these places, go and feel them. Connect with this energy, you know, let us know what you feel when you go to these places, because the energy is hooked into the earth there and it's still happening.
Oh yeah. You know, it's one of the, it's interesting, you know, because like you and I, we live in the new world, right? So like there is a deep ancient past, but it's one that has been lost or denied to us largely because we're not indigenous, or it's been, you know, suppressed. And so our culture is just so young, you know, our everything we're built around is so, when you go to Europe, it's not like this at all. You know, there's that ancient deep roots. And I feel like in the West, we've lost sight of these ancient roots because they're not in our face, you know?
Yeah, the oldest Western architecture we have here in Australia is 200 years old. So we don't have that, you know, we don't have that culture that you have in Europe. We don't have that. I mean, there's indigenous buildings here in Australia, but they try and hide those too. You know, they've turned them into cattle barns and things in Victoria rather than have a look at the architecture. This is the thing here
in Canada, right? Like half the time what ends up happening, like there's this really magical spot near me on Lake Superior. It's right on a ley line, and it's where the shamans used to go to enter the underworld. They call it, it's called Agawak Canyon. And there's these massive pictographs, and the pictographs are at least 4,000 years old. And people were going there for hundreds and hundreds of years. People are still going there. It's not like the Ojibwe who made these just disappeared, you know, but the Canadian government has turned this into a tourist site. They don't protect the pictographs. People can go touch them. They put up all these plaques, and every time they put up a new plaque, the Ojibwe come and they vandalize it because they're like, this is our sacred spot. People still come here to meditate and to go connect to the divine. And you guys are turning this into a tourist spot. You don't even have people protecting it. Everyone's rubbing their hands all over it. It's wild, you know?
Well, we've got the same thing happening where I'm living now. This is a very sacred site to the whole of Australia. Sorry, the garbage truck is coming up the street. But it's sacred because it was a burial site here for the Kadaicha. And anybody with Indigenous blood goes, oh, Kadaicha. You're not supposed to say it because it's like saying boogeymen. But there was a very different tradition of burial for them. And so a lot of the local Indigenous, the Kumbaberi here, don't come up here. Or the men will come up with them. Women are not allowed, supposed to stay up here overnight because it's a scary place where these scary people were buried. And yet our government has got, because with view to the Olympics, they want to bring a cableway here and 520,000 tourists a year is their goal to bring through here. And it's not about that. It's always been a quiet place of burial. It's, you know, if you come here with respect to a huge tradition. And if you come here, it's not safe. It is a very wild place. And the Indigenous encourage this wildness. but that's why the Kadaitcha, who were like the top spiritual men here, if anybody knows about them, were buried here because it was so wild. And yet, they want the fast buck for the Olympics. It's,
I know it's parallels exactly what I'm seeing here, because like Agawa Canyon is a massive, it's a rainforest right on Lake Superior. And to go in, you got to go down into this gulch. So what the government did is they built this road that goes right to it's a tourist site, and a rest area right in front of the religious spot. But then everything else around it is rainforest, wild craziness. So you'll get tourist families who will go there. They'll go check out the pictographs and they go, oh, I want to hike. I can't hike around here with my kids. Like, this is the middle of the jungle,
Yeah.
It's way too
like
intense.
Yeah, we get very fit people here, but like there's no way you'd be able to bring up anybody that's too old or anybody that has
young.
Too young, anybody with any physical disabilities. They just can't do it. It's not safe. And it is a wild place. The weather can change like that. Trees fall all over the place. It's supposed to be a quiet place, and the place will protect itself, but leave it quiet. Don't make it hustly and bustly.
And the government always gets involved. Like, I don't know how true some of this is, but the rumors are that the Ojibwe used to go down to this place. So they used to do these meditation rites. So the way it is that in the low tide, you can sit on these cliffs where the pictographs are. And what they used to do is they would sit and they would meditate when the tide is low, and they would allow the tide to overtake them. And the idea is, when the tide overtakes you, if you can stay in that focus, you'll enter into the underworld. It's that portal.
Very King Canute,
right?
Isn't it? Yeah.
Right. And very, very, but people would die traditionally, if you messed it up. And it's not often, but this is how the Ojibwe would talk about it. So the government doesn't allow them to do that anymore. Doesn't allow them to go and meditate on their sacred site because they think they're going to do something stupid. And it's just like, leave these people alone. Like, give me a break.
Yeah, there's big talk here in Australia about how Indigenous rights, Aboriginal rights, but the tradition, which is the magical tradition of the Indigenous, which is called Kadaitcha for these men, because they actually use magic to challenge the government here, it's completely banned. And I suspect that their plan to try and desecrate this mountain is to further disempower the Indigenous, try and take that Kadaitcha away from them. But I don't believe that the spirit of the Kadaitcha buried here will let that happen. I really don't.
There you go. No, I don't, that's the thing. You can't stop this kind of stuff, and when you're dealing with that traditional magic, even if you were to destroy these places, they can still go to them in the dream time, so it's a totally different thing. It's wild.
It is. Yeah. But we're the people who live here, we will protect it, but also the mountain protects itself as well. So,
absolutely. And
it always has done. And we have a funny feeling that if they push too hard, they'll find out how much she'll protect herself,
Yeah, that's so wild. But, one of my goals is to build a temple right here on Lake Superior, where I'm from, on that ley line. I think that, I just magical stuff.
Well, that's what we're creating here as well. So, it's we officially call it a metaphysical meetup group, but it's a temple and a place where people will be able to come and honor all different traditions, as long as, they want to do it in a way that is non-combative, obviously, and for the empowerment, not only of the remembering of that knowledge, but also for the empowerment of the individual. So
that's beautiful.
Yeah.
We need to get together and talk about your whole temple building. That would be so much fun.
Look, I think one day we should do a live where I take you for a walk around here and I can show you what I've done, and I can even take you down to a couple of spots. But I think we should be able to do that reasonably on my phone. So, yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, we'll work that out. But we should wind down here for our talk. Is there anything you want to end on, or anything you want to mention about Goth subculture before we call it?
People should never disregard the Goth culture. Right? It is the spirit of rebellion that has led to all advancements in civilization, to the creation of civilization itself. And to continue to explore this is amazing, but it should also be honored.
Right. Yeah. Love it. Amazing. So thank you guys all for joining us. Make sure you support Shay. If you check out our description below, you can find links to her channel, Magic Magazine, as well as to 2 videos she produced on this Gothic theme that we're doing. A lot of fun. Make sure you go support her and check out Dion. Sorry, he has his links below as well. And we will be back next week with one final episode on our Goth subculture exploration.
Have a cool Yule and a lovely Letha.
Beautiful, beautiful. Happy solstice.
Yay.
Happy Diwali. All right. Much love, everyone. Take care.
Bye. Bye.
Bye for now. Peace.
Bye.